Cool. I think we can get started now. We've got quite a few people. So hi everyone. Welcome to our event. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we're the University of Birmingham's Virtual Reality Society. So we aim to provide a platform for both students and staff to learn about the world of immersive technology and work together on interesting projects. And we're really excited to have our first lecture of for this term. And we're joined by Professor Bob, who's both our mentor. So he helps us on various projects and just provides mentorship and guidance to all our members. And he's been a expert in the world of VR for over 34 years. So for a lot of us joining from the university, that's more time than we've been alive, as Ryan pointed out.
Shame on you. Whoa.
So thanks a lot, Bob, for joining us. If you want to share your screen and just show us your presentation as well.
Yeah, let's do share sound as well. Let's see it and go. There we go. Hopefully that's visible to you all.
Yep.
Yeah, excellent. Good. Right. Well, good evening,
Yes.
folks. Thank you very much for coming along, and thanks to Ramsha and the UBVR team for inviting me to be their mentor, which is a real privilege. So I was at the university since 2003, but have recently come out of the university and have started off as an independent. And we were talking about what kind of things I could talk about. I mean, I could talk for far too long about far too many subjects over the past years, but we decided that for this first lecture, and I'm sure hopefully I'll give some more, is that I'd focus on one area that I am seriously passionate about, and that's virtual heritage. It's the kind of thing that I've been doing for many years, but certainly during the university period when I was working with a number of students, and you'll see some of the student projects, all of which have been absolutely fantastic. And again, we're working up with UBVR Society, some little vignettes that we're going to put out on social media, showing what the students can do. And students who've come to me, for example, at the beginning of June, with no VR 3D modeling experience at all, and yet have gone away in October with the most phenomenal projects, some of which you'll see in here. When we were at the university, and to some extent I am still involved in this, I mean, we were involved in quite a few different kinds of projects, which I've not got time in for now. I mean, particularly involved in mixed reality and virtual reality for defense, looking at, for example, training robotic operators with the bomb disposal robot you can see here, which is Cutlass, right down to something you'll see again a little bit later, which is mixed reality for command and control, something we used in a heritage project not that long ago with a system that was in Plymouth Sound, relaying information back to our IKEA command table in the Gisbert Cat building on Pridges Road. Also very, and still very heavily involved in healthcare. I mean, healthcare to me is still the biggest challenge and gives the most significant opportunities for virtual and mixed reality. We've been doing a lot of work that's still going on today on introducing scenes of virtual nature into the hospital to help patients, particularly in intensive care, recover both mentally and physically, as you can see here. We've and some of our systems are now actually working and continuing to work, including student projects in the hospitals at Worcester and at Torbay down in Devon. There's an awful lot of Devon content in this because you can probably tell from my accent that I am from the West Country. So I make no apologies for that, but it's been great over the years to be able to take the students down to the West Country and to get them to test out radically new technologies in order to make the invisible visible, which is the strap line of my presentation. Virtual heritage, as I say, we'll go through a number of projects, a little bit of history as to where virtual heritage came from, but focusing on some of the projects that we've been doing, particularly maritime, not exclusively, and finishing off with a couple of the more recent projects, which was looking at discovering artifacts on the lake bed in a reservoir in the west of England, and also our most recent Mayflower project, which we delivered with absolutely no funding whatsoever last year in September 2020, which was the 400th anniversary of the sailing of the Pilgrims from Plymouth to Plymouth, or at least Cape Cod in the United States. So what is virtual heritage? I dug this definition up. It's quite embarrassing because it's very, very wordy. It kind of sort of hammers home the thrust of this presentation, however, but we're using computer-based interactive technologies, namely things like virtual and augmented reality, to record, preserve, and recreate artifacts of historic, religious, and cultural significance, and then importantly, delivering these to a global audience, both as part of STEM activities and as we're trying to do with the Mayflower project across the web for more people to experience and enjoy what it is we're doing. It's not new. Virtual heritage took off in the UK back in the 1990s. A very good friend of mine who sadly passed away a few years ago, called Mike Bevan. He was the editor of VR News for many years, and he set up virtual heritage conferences in Bath, again in the West Country. And we were able to expose a lot of the good work going on in Switzerland and in France. For example, the caves of Lascaux, the terracotta warriors of Siam, the tomb of the Queen Nefertiti in Egypt, and Pompeii. In fact, Pompeii in the 1990s was the most overdone virtual heritage demonstration on the planet. There were more virtual Pompeiis than you could actually shake a stick at. But that's not one of the projects I've ever actually done. Now, I got quite interested in virtual heritage back in 1993. When I was giving a keynote at a conference in Monte Carlo, of all places, and there was a particular presentation there that blew me away. And this was carried out using a very basic at the time model of the Abbey de Cluny, which is an abbey that was built in the 10th century. And what happened was that they over what was then the French Numéris ISDN telephone link, there was a young lady in Monte Carlo who was giving a priest in Paris a guided tour of what the original abbey looked like. And I thought, well, this is incredible, because if we can do this, so that, for example, between parts of the UK or parts of the world, we can share heritage experiences, what a powerful tool that would be, particularly for education and for things like public engagement, finding out about artifacts and finding out about sites that are on their doorstep, but they never knew that they actually existed there. And there's a lot of good examples of that in Plymouth, which we'll come on to a little bit later on. 95, we were also very lucky, and we were only given 12 days to do this, was to develop a virtual reality museum to support the Lowry Centre. Now, the Lowry Centre, which of course is very much active today, it's where the media city is in Salford, just outside of Manchester, where the BBC do a lot of their news and their breakfast TV programs from. And L.S. Lowry, of course, was a very famous, very stylized artist in around about the 1930s, when he painted this painting called "Coming from the Mill," and he always represented his characters as what were called matchstalk figures. So we wanted to try and capture the idea of what Lowry himself called a dreamscape. He described his pictures of Salford, Manchester, and all the smoky towns around that area as dreamscapes. So we thought, well, that's great, because he's made it easier for us to really develop 3D scenarios based on his work. So again, with the giving access to the original paintings, we were able to scan these in and to be able to create this dreamscape, which is essentially based on the coming from the mill. But if you look at it, when you had a headset on, you could look around this picture and you would see all different aspects, all different paintings of Lowry's. The only reason we were able then to do it in 12 days was because of Lowry's paintings. If it had been maybe a well-known artist who put a lot of time into his or her artworks, then we wouldn't have been able to get away with this. The fact that he used flat figures, as you can see here, walking down the road, the fact that he used very, very simplistic brushstrokes was really a saving grace for us in being able to get this work done on time. But it was one of the crucial factors that led to the Heritage Lottery Fund putting forward multi-million-pound contracts to set up at the Lowry Centre at Salford Quays. And then another project that we were involved in, which again really hammers home the strapline, making the invisible visible. We performed, that was the first ever Virtual Stonehenge project. Again, there have been many Stonehenge projects since this, in 1996. And the idea behind this was originally for English Heritage, would you believe, to look at how they could remove the dreadful visitor centre that was in place at Stonehenge, because they were planning to have a road go under the A303. Now, you've probably seen on the television that only very recently have the contracts for that road been put out, but they were planning for this in 1996. But the great thing about Virtual Stonehenge, had it gone the right way, would have been that we could show people what Stonehenge is all about, not just walking around the henge, holding those dreadful audio taped headsets that they had, but things that you couldn't see. So, for example, with ours, you could see the avenue. You could see this is the avenue along which allegedly the rocks from is it Pwllheli or in Wales, the blue rocks, and then you had something called the avenue and the cursus, which allegedly again was used for Roman gladiator trials and what have you. But there were things about the stones that were very, very important. Number one was, if you go to the stones, you only find that lichen and moss grows from about 6 foot upwards, because people who were allowed into the stones could touch the stones, and the acid on their fingers would destroy all this important growth. But also, very, very importantly, were the actual carvings on the stones that people never get to see. So, for example, if you look on this, you can probably just make out. If I do this and do that, you'll get an after image like that and back. So on some of the stones, you've got blades from the gladiators' knives, and on this particular stone, you've got Christopher Wren's graffiti. Christopher Wren of St. Paul's Cathedral fame went and graffitied on the stones at Stonehenge, and people never get to see this. But those stones are capturing their own little history long after they were originally put there, centuries and centuries ago. We completed this in 1996, and we were fortunate, and I was very fortunate to be at the London Planetarium with the late great Sir Patrick Moore, where we presented Virtual Stonehenge, and we've developed it since. In fact, I remember the planetarium, they tried to inject a synthetic smell of grass into the planetarium to give the people the feeling that they were at Stonehenge, which is being projected on the big planetarium dome in London. Sadly, that failed. It smelled more like fairy liquid being splashed all along the floor than it did the synthetic smell of grass, which is a little bit of a shame. But again, here you can see all the stones being labeled, so it's much more of a database. And you can click on the Christopher Wren. You can click on the Christopher Wren virtual graffiti, and that will bring up more information about the source and the origin of the person who made that graffiti in the first place. Fast forward to 1999, we see the beginnings of the serious games community, particularly Unreal, and the Unreal editor that was given out with the original Unreal game, which was an absolute masterpiece in terms of the history of real-time 3D virtual reality. A good friend of mine who is regularly on LinkedIn, a guy called Victor Leon, and his team at Digitalo Studios produced the world's first virtual Notre Dame. And again, if you look at it now, I still get very impressed by seeing this in terms of the detail that they managed to achieve. If you go close up to the stained glass windows, yeah, I mean, the actual demonstration does fall down a bit, but you had animated monks there, and the monks would give you a guided tour, and you could fly all around the cathedral. And it just goes to show what people can do when they are given the right accessible tools in order to produce content like this. And I've said for quite a long time that as we were coming to the end of the 1990s and we were seeing virtual reality beginning to deteriorate in terms of the trust that companies who had invested in virtual reality put into buying the equipment and again being too focused on technology, what we found was the serious games community was beginning to bring on online games and software and hardware that most people could use in their own homes and most people could design with. And projects like Virtual Reality Notre Dame really did help move that along. So that's really is a potted history. I mean, there's much more. There's much more to the history of virtual heritage than I can go into this evening. And what I wanted to do was just to show some of the projects, again, particularly those that involve students at the University of Birmingham, and some of the collaborative work we've been doing in the West Country. So here you see a Google Earth overview map of Devon. And as you say, it's no surprise that because I was born about there, that a lot of our projects are carried out in Devon, particularly with regards to the heritage side of things. And yeah, it's a great place to take students, and it's a really great place to try out new technologies too, as you'll see, from submersibles in the water off in Plymouth Sound, right through to drones and various other pieces of technology that we've used on very hazardous places on the moors themselves. So a good place for students, particularly in Lech Enge, where I was based, to try out developing their equipment and then take it out and test it, but then get an historical perspective at the same time. So we shall go through some of these projects. Now, the first area that we looked at was a place called Wembury, just around the coastline, east of Plymouth, around the coastline, a place that I remember well from when I was a child. And the original focus for Wembury, and these graphics are beginning to look a little bit old now, but they're still in use. The idea for Wembury was, as I mentioned earlier on, delivering scenes of virtual nature into hospitals. So I had one of my PhD students, Cheng Hian, who is now unfortunately he had to leave the university as well, but he's now working as an independent. He built this entire coastal path around the Wembury area, and over the years, not only have we had this being tested and looking at the impact of this on sleep quality and restorative mental qualities on patients in intensive care. Two PhD students who were involved in that, but most recently it's being used to help with rehabilitation. So here you can see somebody in the health hospital using a motor-med, which is basically a pedal cycle, and that individual is pedaling this avatar in a sort of reclining bicycle or tricycle along the coastal path. And what happens there is they do it once, and then the following day they compete with a ghost version of their performance from the day before. So every day they've got to try a little bit harder in order to improve their legs after some form of traumatic accident, or if they've had an operation. So the heritage connection at Wembury is something that's happened to us quite a lot. We find that when we travel to these places, particularly for healthcare or some other reason, we're out there flying drones and doing photographs, and the local people come up to us and they speak to us. What are you doing? Why are you here? You're from Birmingham? Well, why? What's going on? And the great thing is that when we start talking to them, they start talking to us about history, what they remember, what their parents told them, and I think every time this happened to us, we felt duty bound to carry out some kind of thank you using a virtual reality demo. So the heritage connection with Wembury, if you look back here, if you look at that island there is called the Great Mewstone. In 1909, there was a plan presented to the House of Lords to turn Wembury into the largest commercial port in the United Kingdom, bigger than Southampton, bigger than London, bigger than Liverpool. And as you can imagine, again, if you look back at that picture, decimating this what is today an area of outstanding natural beauty into something like this would have been absolutely catastrophic. I mean, just look at the railway lines and just think of all the houses that were built on the side of this hill, of these hills. So we got involved with, I think we had about 3 students working on this, typically buying many assets as we can from online sources such as TurboSquid, and trying to pull together a snapshot of what the Wembury docks would have looked like had the plan not been thrown out by the House of Lords in the early 1900s. And we had a couple of students also working on augmented reality, with the idea of very early days using iPad-based augmented reality, again to show the villagers what it might have been looked like had this thing gone ahead. And just to be able to take that image the picture that I took from the top of the church, and just to give them an idea of how this development would have ruined their area forever, became a very interesting, very interesting pastime with the villagers of Wembury, but also the local school children. So this is where we start finding that heritage. One of the biggest rewards with heritage is that you're drawing in members of the public, and you're drawing in school children, and you're showing them history, but you're showing them history with present day technology. And that's actually quite a powerful tool. Some other ones, some other projects. So the Great Mewstone, if you look at this map, the Great Mewstone is there. Come back towards Plymouth, certainly back in the I think it's the 1800s, and we have this area. This is Drake's Island. We've been on Drake's Island with scanners, doing 3D scans, Matterport scans of the tunnels on Drake's Island. But this area here is called Firestone Bay. And again, back in the, can't you see the top of this now, but I think can you see it, Ramsey? Is it 1774, something like that? 1774, this guy called John Day took a ship, a very small ship, a sloop called Maria, built a container into the ship, and then sunk it, deliberately sunk it as a submarine into Firestone Bay with the aim of spending 24 hours on the seabed. Sadly, that didn't happen, and unfortunately, the Maria imploded, and he was never seen again, despite the efforts of this Mr. Day, this Dr. Falk, who thought that because Mr. Day was so deep, he would be in suspended animation, and that they could actually bring him back alive. So we were keen to use virtual reality to show, what John Day's last vision might be of his bottle of water, his biscuits, the candle, and the stopwatch, and just to show people how cramped it would have been and how terrible it would have been for that to be his resting place. He did go down in history, however. He did have the unfortunately dubious honor of being the world's first submarine fatality. Not a particularly nice way to go down in history, but nevertheless, we thought it was worth considering. And the interesting thing is that, again, people in Plymouth have no idea that this happened off the coast of Plymouth Hoe, and it's absolutely crazy. There's so much fantastic stuff down there, but nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows, for example, that this ship, the Amethyst, which featured in a very famous movie with Richard Todd and various other people, called the Yangtze incident. I mean, the Amethyst was a ship that single-handedly escaped the ravages of the Chinese communists and managed to escape and with relatively minimal loss of life. And it came back to Plymouth. There's a picture here down here where it came back to Plymouth, where it was very unceremoniously scrapped, which is a real shame. So again, some student projects. This was a French Erasmus student who joined us, who built the 3D model of the Amethyst completely from scratch. No idea, no experience of 3D ever before, but just to show people today that what it would have looked like to have this great big ship poking out into what is known as Sutton Harbour. We'll come back to Sutton Harbour a little bit later on the Mayflower project. But today, this is a very well-to-do marina. It's got a lot of al fresco dining, completely changed from what it was. But there's literally, and you can't see it here, but there's literally just one post now, but alongside this Miller and what's his name steakhouse, one little post with one little piece of text on saying Amethyst was scrapped here. Such a famous ship, such an incredible history, and very little to show members of the public that it still exists. We've experimented with augmented reality, not very successfully. You'll see some of the things we've done with the Mayflower project, but being able to, I mean, the great thing about just trying these things out is things like the model, the Beagle, which sailed from Barnstone Bay back in 1831. You can actually buy a model of the Beagle from Turbo Squid for maybe a few tens of dollars. So we were just quite interested in using this with Unity and Vuforia, and looking at trying to simulate it leaving Barnstone Bay as it did back in 1831. Again, okay, this is particularly primitive because you can see that obviously the sails aren't moving. The reflection, we didn't do too badly on the wake, but the reflection was pretty strong, and the scaling was a little bit suspect. But nevertheless, again, it was a useful exercise for the students to undertake. One of my favorites of all time. Everyone thinks of people like Jacques Cousteau and the Americans when it comes to building underwater habitats. What people don't realize is that this guy, Colin Irwin, who is now a professor at the University of Liverpool, at the time was a member of I think it was the Bournemouth British Tobacco Club, and he spent £1,000 to build this, which is basically a big tank on a mountain with lots of old railway sleepers, and he called it the Glaucus Project. And he spent a whole week underwater, monitoring the carbon dioxide levels, injecting oxygen acid when he needed. He had his meals delivered to him by divers, but he was down there for a complete week. And in 2015 was the 50th anniversary of the Glaucus. Nobody in Plymouth knew, absolutely nobody in Plymouth knew that this this incredible British maritime piece of history was still on the seabed, rusting away. In fact, that's a picture of it, and it's just been left there. So we thought we really had to do something about this. So again, another student worked alongside us and developed a game, or both in headset form and in desktop form. And here, for example, you could open up the the Lairdale apparatus for monitoring carbon dioxide levels. You could actually take soda lime out to keep the levels stable and inject oxygen as and when it was needed. So fantastic effort again, just to show people what was possible with virtual reality, and also what was on their doorstep. And Colin came down to the university in 2015, put on I think it was an Oculus Rift at the time, and we were able to take him into his habitat for the first time in 50 years, and it was a wonderful example of bringing back memories for this pioneer of British maritime history. And a lot of what we do in the West Country, I mentioned defence, is submarine based. We do a lot of work with the Navy, the Royal Marines down there. I'm just showing this very quickly because this introduces another project. This is a project called SubSafe, which we fortunately were able to conduct one of the longest and most thorough experimental evaluations of a virtual reality system. We had 188 naval ratings actually take part in different conditions to show statistically significantly that youngsters who experience a virtual reality submarine before going on board the real boat performed significantly better in terms of knowing the emergency access points, knowing the emergency equipment locations, than those who got the conventional training. And we learned an awful lot from this project. We were working on this project in different guises since 1999. And quite recently, we've started work with the Royal Navy's Heritage Centre down at Devonport. And in fact, over the next few years, funding permitting, they are going to put together a new Cold War museum based on HMS Courageous. So HMS Courageous is this 1960s submarine that still exists. My dear old dad worked on a sister ship called the Conqueror, which is one of the submarines they sent to the Falklands. And what we did was we produced, as you saw, a three-dimensional model of the submarine in a very simple hangar. But then, rather than trying to build all of this interior as we had to do with SubSafe, which took us months and months and months, we then decided to go through it with a 360 camera, a Ricoh Theta 360 camera. But being able to jump from node to node, but then being able to come out and see where you were on the submarine by that three-dimensional representation of all the different decks and compartments. So merging simplistic 3D with more photorealistic 360s and panoramas was a particularly powerful technique. And again, from a submarine perspective, this is the HMS A7. A7 in December 1914, just before the First World War, sadly was lost at sea with all hands. This is the first class of boat to be built actually in the United Kingdom at Barrow-in-Furness. The idea was that we were working with a city team of divers that I've known for years, and for them to go down and carry out a non-invasive survey of the wreck to try and find out exactly what happened. Again, can't go into too much detail here, but we actually built a very crude model of the submarine so that these divers were able to swim down virtually and decide where they were going to focus their attention, because they only had a limited time at the bottom. So, a couple hundred feet down, they could only spend a limited time down there. And what they did was they then brought back the photographs from the bottom. As you can see here, we've got this is the conning tower. This is the one of the starboard torpedo tube, and there's a giant conger eel that frightened the hell out of one of them when they were trying to do their magnetic survey. Right, very quickly, because again I'm just conscious of time. I'm going to try and get this to run. Should be okay. There we go. So this is the actual VR model that we came up with at the end. I'll try and fly through this very quickly so you can see the different effects. To try to experiment with turbidity and lighting and backscatter. You can see the conning tower there. If I press F1, I can take off all the details. So you can see what the submarine looked like in its pristine condition before it actually sank on that fateful day. And then you can see exactly what it looks like now when it's with all those all the bridge aspects that have been ripped away by the tides and by anchors. And you can also just about make out the hawser, the wire ropes that the Royal Navy put on to try and bring the submarine back up. But unfortunately, that was not successful. Here we go. Right, we're moving on to other sites, and I'll go through some of these quickly. We use a lot of drone. We do a lot of drone work, or we did a lot of drone work, particularly down on Dartmoor. And drones are fantastic for virtual heritage studies because not only can we model, use different packages like Pix4D to model things in 3D, but they can get us access to areas that are very, very hazardous. This is Foxtor Mire on Dartmoor, better known as Grimpen Mire. For any of you who've read The Hound of the Baskervilles, you may recognize Foxtor Mire as Grimpen Mire, where I think it was very famous because it's very close to Princetown Jail, Dartmoor Jail, and you don't want to get stuck in the middle of this mire. It is absolutely treacherous. As a result, trying to use drones to find the remains of World War II aircraft makes complete sense. So again, you do not want to go there ever. If you do, then you take your life into your hands. But being able to fly the drone over and look for different artifacts, this was a bit of a waste of time because we discovered that these aircraft crashed somewhere else on the moors. But nevertheless, it was a very useful exercise in showing drones and the use of drones on Dartmoor. Although there was one we did for some time, we had a £13,000 DJI Matrice, which was brimming with equipment that we sent over, and unfortunately the antenna came loose halfway through the mission, and it came down in the middle of Foxhole Mire. So two of my students, Vish and Chris, as you can see, are venturing into the mire despite my concerns, because it is a seriously dangerous place to go. And they're walking along, and then they suddenly get lower and lower, and you think, "Oh God, what's happening there? We're not losing them, are we?" But fortunately, they managed to find the drone because of the last bit of battery. The last bit of battery life was still pinging the GPS location of the drone. So we fortunately all came out of the mire safe and sound with the drone intact. But we still use drones. Well, we were using drones even up to recently. For example, again with Pix4D, flying over historical quarries and converting the video into textured 3D. And again, it saves an awful lot of time because you can import this into Unity and into a simple topographical model, and you can use it to bring a great deal of detail. And you can see the scale. I didn't notice just down here. You can just about make out our van. And that 3D model was created in just a single 15-minute flight using the DJI Inspire, which is amazing. Right, Barator. So this is the first of the two projects I want to go into a little bit more detail about, because this is what makes virtual reality and virtual heritage so exciting. It's because you not only can use it to represent different places, but you can also use it in conjunction with quite sophisticated sensor data to reveal what people cannot see. So Barator, for those of you who don't know it, or is where they filmed, or Steven Spielberg filmed Warhorse. And he obviously loved it there. They were based in a place beyond Sheepstore. This is Sheepstore. Beyond there is a location called Ditsworthy Warren, which is a very old cottage where they set up, and you can see the cottage on the film itself. We've been going down to Barator for years and years and years. Barator is the main reservoir on Dartmoor that feeds water into Plymouth. And it is absolutely steeped with history. Again, I haven't got time to go into all of this, so we're just going to literally talk about a couple of examples. One of my favourite areas is the old railway line at Barator and Sheepstore Halt. This is an old Great Western Railway that took people from Yelverton to Princetown. Princetown was at one point the highest railway station in England, in the UK for that matter. And it was used over the years to ferry all kinds of people and even materials, granite, for example, some granite that was actually used to build some of the columns of St Nelson's Column in London. So very, very simple, very quiet, very out of the way railway line, but actually very, very famous. And again, we wanted to, excuse me, we wanted to show the local people about what was actually there. So we recreated the halt in glorious 3D. Again, just do very quickly do a run through. Again, this is using Unity. This is also quite old now. This is about 7 or 8 years old, maybe more. But again, being able to pull together different effects, different fogging and misting effects. And if I come down, if you go there today, that still exists. That gate still exists, and those steps still exist. So we have some very good reference markers to build this particular model. So you can see Virtual Reservoir with the dam there, and then if I go to the edge, flying from the local nearby World War II airfield is a solitary Spitfire. Let's go back very quickly. And inside the hut, you can see the railway closure notice, the timetable, and we have a nighttime version of this as well. But the engine is really nice, but again, this is not something we built. This is something we bought for about $100, $100 off TurboScript. So again, it shows what you can do with some of the assets that are actually out there. Now, we were very interested in modeling all the stuff around the outskirts of Barra, so over land, on ground, but we also were very keen to find out what was underneath. So we were very lucky to, 2 or 3 times now, we've teamed up with a Cornish company called, who have brought along their unmanned surface vessel called Kermit, and Kermit has a very high definition multi-beam sonar that's lowered whilst this thing is carrying out autonomous scans of the reservoir itself. So this is a drone picture. Here's Virtual Reservoir. You can see Plymouth in the distance, River Tamar here, and the area we covered is roughly represented there, although we did extend, interestingly, in towards the dam, which you'll see in a second. And when we converted, we using MeshLab and other techniques to convert the point cloud into a polygon-based fly through. When we looked at the virtual model from above and compared it with a late 18th century map, the hedgerows and the building foundation. So that's Essery Farm, as it's called. You can see the farm there. You can even make out some of the actual hedgerows, the shape of these very peculiar shapes of the hedgerows. So you can see the road going towards Sheepstore Bridge. Sheepstore Bridge is there, showing signs of damage according to the sonar. That was the original river that went through the area, River Meavy, and this was the remains of Drake's Leat, which was a leat, a man-made canal put in by Sir Francis Drake many centuries ago, or a couple of centuries ago, in order to again bring water from Dartmoor to Plymouth. And again, closing in on, zooming in, you can see the foundation. So there's the map that's from the 19th century map, and you can work out there the actual layout of the farm, right down to the actual bits that jut out look. And this was the old duck pond, believe it or not, with the duck pond with a little island in the middle. The detail was incredible. So this was giving us an exploratory heritage tool now, converting sonar data into virtual reality and being able to change the lighting so we could actually identify objects on the seabed. And while we were doing this, we were exploring some of the outskirts that we didn't really pay much attention to. Excuse me. And we came across some very interesting artifacts, which you see coming up here. These little blips. These were very much man-made blips. It was almost very spherical and smooth in nature. We had no idea what these were. So after a long period of research, we came across this one single picture from the 1940s, and we saw this. So this, I don't know if you can make this out, but there are two almost like structures, lines of structures. There's spherical structures on between the location of the old bridge, going right across, and they turned out to be torpedo nets. Now this is incredible because we then started doing a bit more research. In 1959, you can see from that scan and that picture that in 1959 these things still existed. So these are spheres that are about 4 feet in diameter, and they became very apparent during the 1959 drought. So we thought, well, wouldn't it be good if we could go and find out exactly what these were? They turned out to be T-class spheres, which are suspended underneath with these 17-inch diameter chainmail nets to stop torpedoes actually hitting the dam. There was a threat The Germans had already carried out a reconnaissance image back in 1941. And in fact, again in 1941, this Junkers Ju-88 was obviously undertaking some kind of photographic mission, and we know that these planes were capable of carrying torpedoes. They didn't have the bouncing bomb, but they were certainly capable of carrying torpedoes. And in fact, if you go there today, there's sheep store. If you go there today and dig down into the marshy bits, you can still find pieces of those aircraft. So the physical evidence is still there to this day. So we used two of our little ROVs. This is the blue ROV2 and the Trident ROV. So here you see the unmanned surface vessel doing its thing. This is us finding those spheres. And then we've got just another minute or so, you'll fade out and you'll see we also went there during a drought, not as bad a drought as 1959, but a drought nonetheless. There's the old bridge support. And this is our little ROV. This is the Trident, which is incredibly difficult to fly, going down. And within about 30 minutes, we found them. It was it was one of the best projects that I've done with students and collaborators down in the West Country ever. And not only did we find the spheres, but underneath, we found the chainmail nets as well. And I was uncontrollable. It was like Indiana Jones. It really was. It was just finding something that we'd seen the pictures, but now we were actually witnessing it for real. We went back again October of last year with a more capable submersible, this time equipped with sonar, and we were able to pick up a couple more of the spheres slightly deeper into the reservoir, which again was kind of gives me hope that all the spheres still exist going right across the width of the lake. And then finally, the Mayflower project, which has been literally 6 years of a loving relationship with no money whatsoever, but thanks to the work of some fantastic students and a couple of my research fellows, we managed to achieve something I never thought we would. All started on the coast of Hastings at a place called Pett Level, where back in the late 1670s, the wreck was scuttled at the Battle of Beachy Head to prevent the French from capturing her. So in the storms of 2013-14, it was so bad that it actually uncovered the wreck. You can see it there at low tide. And we were invited down by the Hastings Museum to do a quick drone with a DJI Phantom, a quick drone survey. And it was during this we thought of a really crazy project idea, which was, wouldn't it be great if we could use augmented reality to visualize the ship in its final position? So to fly the drone over the wreck and then to put a virtual reality version of the ship and to show people what it would have looked like in its final days before it was set alight to prevent capture. So we were joined by two incredibly competent 3D modeling students, Cécile and Emilien, who came from Paris Tech in Laval. As I'm sure you know, Laval still to this date holds one of the best virtual reality conferences in the world. And you can see how competent they were. They built the AN model for us, literally timber by timber, plank by plank. And we were able to use this both in virtual reality and in augmented reality form. Now, if you blink, you'll miss this. We took the model down. We were able to show it in location at the site, and we did manage. If I just stop it there, we did manage, although it was pretty primitive, to show the wreck looking down from the position of the drone. So you can see there's the virtual wreck, and there's the actual real sands. So again, first example of virtual reality, augmented reality through a drone, I don't know, but again, it was a damned exciting achievement. And once again, we had the fantastic pleasure of presenting this to the local villagers and to local school kids. We also presented at Hastings Museum. Even Amber Rudd, the ex-Home Secretary, if you recall, she came along to see our work, and it's even been shown at a museum in Catalonia in Spain. And as a result of that, we started getting invited all over the place, from Dartmouth, because Dartmouth is another town with a great maritime history, to my own hometown in Plymouth, where we were asked, well, this is great. How would you like to get involved in the Mayflower 400 project? Because what you've done is absolutely fantastic. We must have this for September of 2020. And we agreed. And they said, well, go away and start giving us money, giving us some idea of how much it would cost. And we gave them bits and bits. It wasn't going to be expensive. And needless to say, we didn't hear anything ever again. So great shame, but we decided, what the heck, we'll go and do it anyway. So the original aspirations were to involve school kids and public and members of the public. We were going to do augmented reality. We were going to do avatars. We were going to get deliverable on all kinds of platforms, from VR headsets through to tablets and smartphones and what have you. And the high level vision was that we wanted it to be more than just a VR demo. And I think that these are the three important things here. So much more than just a tech demo, something that had a legacy. So it wasn't just going to happen in 2020. It would go on beyond and help education, not just in Plymouth, but in all the different trail sites for the Mayflower that exist around the UK. So very strong focus on STEM and public engagement from the outset, and very much international aspirations as well. The idea was, at some stage, to try and link schools up so that American kids could talk to the British kids about what the history is to them, and vice versa. It didn't come to that. But I was invited over to Plymouth, Massachusetts, before the Mayflower 2 was put in for refit. It's recently come out of refit, as you may know, in a wonderful condition. And I was allowed to go on board with my 360 camera and do a lot of survey work, and also to film some of the period actors, which actually became very, very important from the perspective of the avatar creation later on. They've got a wonderful outfitting facility there, a wonderful wardrobe, and the Plymouth plantation with all the artifacts that they've got there that were brought over in the Mayflower 2 when it sailed from Brixham all those years ago, are still there. So a minefield of artifacts that we were able to model. And we were also very fortunate with Plymouth Plantation, and they've been fantastic supporters ever since, the guys in Massachusetts, is they gave us access to the 3D scan of the ship when it was taken. This is Mayflower 2, when it was taken into Mystic Seaport for the renovation, and also gave us access to William Baker's plans of the Mayflower 2, which have been held at MIT since 1951. So to whiz through what we did, we put together some basic demonstrations to show people what could be achieved. This is a very simple 3D model, again, from TurboSquid, combined two models, the best features thereof, and we showed it in place in a hypothetical harbour. We did some AR trials in 2017 on a static vessel, and both in Plymouth and Bayard's Cove in Dartmouth. We also did some trials in 2017 of that same model, but moving across Plymouth Sound. Again, if you look, we actually got slightly better results than we did with the Beagle on this, although the wake is far too extreme. The sails are moving, the flags are moving. Still plenty to do, but for a trial to show the possibility, it was really, really worthwhile. As for augmented reality headsets, and for those of you who know me on LinkedIn, I'm not a great fan. One of my big criticisms of AR headsets, and this is the Dream Glass, is when you take them outside. Here I am trying to look for the Mayflower in Plymouth Sound. You can just about make out something there, which is very Marie Celeste, but it's absolutely appalling. I just wish for the day when someone produce something that we can use in the outside world, because that will revolutionize augmented reality from the position it is now. The crew, we did experiment with virtual crew. We went through a number of trials to try and develop this. We've got here very, very simple 3D models that some of our colleagues put together. We even had them in Red Nose Day for the school kids down in Plymouth, which is great fun. They love that, but very, very primitive, not very convincing. We also teamed up with the Jubilee Sailing Trust based in Southampton. These are guys who put these big, tall ships out to sea for the benefit of disabled users. Fantastic organisation. And the bosun's mate of the ship, Beth, very kindly put on a perceptron neuron suit, which is like a very material exoskeleton. And in the worst weather conditions ever, that lovely girl went right up the mast and went through all the actions of unfurling the sails, whilst with a 360 camera on her head and a 360 camera on her chest. And we captured the motion from the perception neurons suit and tried to feed it into simple bone configurations for avatars, but the noise, the actual electronic noise was so bad, and we had to ditch that. So finally, we teamed up with a guy in Royal Leamington Spa, Mike Acosta, who has produced a whole range of avatars for us, including those that I observed in Massachusetts. And he uses all manner of tools in order to sculpt the face, produce 3D dynamics for the clothing, and so on. And again, he's done this completely free of charge, because obviously he can then use this with his students. We wanted a detailed avatar model of Edward Winslow. I live currently in Droitwich. This is me showing the mayor of Droitwich, the virtual reality Mayflower. Droitwich is one of the trail towns. Obviously, Edward Winslow, born in the town, was one of the key governors of Plymouth Plantation, and played a huge role in the establishment of the plantation. Of course, this is the only painting of him that's left, which is no good to us. So we were, how do we represent him in 1620? So we looked at this actor called Barry Sloane, who played Edward Winslow in a TV program called Saints and Strangers. We looked at Major Edward Winslow, who's the 6th generation of Edward Winslow's brother, who was also born in Droitwich. And we finally came up with this rather dashing-looking character, and he is now our Edward Winslow avatar on board the Mayflower itself. And finally, we've got the actual place of departure itself, the Sutton Harbour or Barbican on Plymouth. I'm not going through this. If Ramsay, if you want the PDFs of this, so people can look at the research that went into this, which was huge, I'm more than happy to let you have that after the presentation. I will do that. Key to this was the existence of a physical model, which is in the Guildhall in Plymouth City Centre, fairly basic and full of inaccuracies. And unfortunately, we didn't really want to use this because it was too clean, and it made the whole place look very, very modern with these concrete wharves and quays, which it wouldn't have been. We also heard of another model, this very strange, and very controversial artist called Robert Lenkiewicz in Plymouth, who's again died many years ago. But apparently there was another model that was stored in his basement. And to cut a long story short, I managed to track down this guy called Scott Gleed, who single-handedly renovated this model, and you can see, and actually put some more detail into the model. So we were able to use some of this to create the final Barbican model that we had. But we couldn't find where the model went. Where did it go? We had absolutely no idea. So, true to Indiana Jones and the big hangar in which the Lost Ark of Covenant was stored at the end of the film, we found that it had been moved to a hangar on the disused airfield in Plymouth and Rowborough. So we were able to get hold of it, and as you can see, it's in a terrible, terrible state. So again, we could use some of the actual coastline layouts, but very, very little else. So back to TurboSquid, CG Trader, Unity. We tried a version of the model that we found far too clean, far too modernistic, and really not accurate at all. We tried again with some different models and some different effects in Unity, but again, it didn't quite look quite right. And then we finally finished off with the version that we presented in September 2020. Much dirtier, no concrete walls or quays, very old buildings, a lot of sort of mess. I mean, if we had virtual smell, we could have made this an absolute treat, because the whole place, there were outbreaks of cholera. It was filthy. And again, it's just a very quick. I'm conscious I've got about 3 minutes left, but if we can go through or zoom through this, I had hoped to get this running live, but for some reason it's crashing on me tonight. So again, we've recently updated this area, which won't bother you. But if you go down towards the actual Mayflower steps, this is Castle Street, and Castle Street is known as Damnation Alley. There were something like 12 pubs in Castle Street. Castle Street still exists. Each pub had a brothel, so that's one of the reasons why it was known as Damnation Alley. It was where a lot of individuals, where there was a lot of press ganging as well. People being popped over the head and then taken on board the ships. And with this, you can go out in a little shallop. You can actually go out to the Mayflower itself. You can get on board, and you can sort of see how it looked possibly in the Pilgrims' final journey. And there's our rather dashing Edward Winslow. Currently updating it. My friend Chris over in Canada is updating the model now. You can see here we've got Jacka Bakery. Jacka Bakery still exists, where the Pilgrims got their bread and their biscuits from before they set sail. He's even put Doctor Who's TARDIS in there because he knows I like science fiction, and all my students always put in a little science fiction thing to keep their supervisor happy. And there's the team. That's Chris from Canada, fantastic 3D modeler, fantastic 3D modeler, and that's Mike from Warwick, and we've got various other people. And the Bluestone very kindly gave us their effort and their time free of charge to set up the virtual.1620 Mayflower website. That is, we're hopefully going to update in the next couple of months. So why do we do it? First of all, we do it because of the challenges. It's evaluating new technologies and gathering knowledge about things that a lot of people who live very close simply don't have. Field testing new kit, be this new kinds of submarines, this Vish with the Matterport in Drake's Island, digitizing old historic hulks for 3D records, capturing aircraft from the Cold War, etc., etc. It's great to take the kit out of the laboratory and into the real world, because there's nothing better than bad weather or salt water to show that student projects don't work. It's a way in which we can also demonstrate our battle cry, if you like, humans first, technology second. And we found with a lot of these technologies, when it comes to virtual heritage, some of them are pretty good, some of them are pretty bad. And again, it all depends on the population that you're working with. Public engagement, absolutely the number one joint priority. Now, I've lectured from abandoned churches on Dartmoor. We've about the village just underneath Virtual Reservoir, etc., etc. We've opened the eyes of so many people to what virtual heritage can do, and the impact on school kids, both able school kids and disabled school kids, special needs kids, and what have you. Generating our own virtual reality badges for the scouts and the guides and the cubs and the brownies. That has been an absolute pleasure. Coming soon, 10 minutes from where I live is Willow Court Farmhouse, which has got links back to Henry VIII. You can see the state of it now. We've just got permission literally today to do a drone flyover to do our own 3D survey of the structure, so we can start building what this farm looked like many decades and indeed centuries ago. And hopefully sometime in May, again with our relationship with the Royal Marines, we're going to go out to a place called Pier Cellars. Then we came across Pier Cellars, which looks very secret. It's like a building built into the cliffs at Corsan Bay to the west of Plymouth. And we were out there with our little boat at the time, because we were experimenting in sending webcam video from this boat back to our mixed reality command table, which was in the building at Gisford Cap, and it worked. Unbelievably, it worked. You see Chris, and he's actually looking at this 3D representation, different sensor sources, and he's getting nearly live video feed from the cameras on board the boat. When we had that little boat out, testing it out in Corsan Bay. It was a lovely day, and we came across this place built into the cliffside. And Pier Cellars was actually built in 1888, and the amazing thing was it was used to test what was called the Brennan torpedoes. The Brennan torpedoes had contra-rotating propellers, and they were wire-guided, almost sort of pulling left, pulling right, from drums located inside this tunnel. And in fact, as I get a bit closer up, speed this along a bit, you can see the launch rail. There's the launch rail on this schematic here. You can see the launch rail from which the torpedoes were actually launched. So hopefully in May, the Royal Marines are going to take us out so that we can do a series of quite comprehensive 3D scans inside that location. Thank you for your time. I'm finished. I've covered far too much than I should, I'm sure, but there's plenty more of this stuff, and happy to take questions, comments, or whatever.
Thank you so much for that amazing talk, Bob. So I think the first question we have is, what kind of active usage or lifespan have some of these heritage VR projects had before they've been taken down or retired by the commissioning body?
What commissioning body? That's a very
Levy.
good question.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No. Very little of this work has been commissioned. Most of the work came from, most of the work was actually paid for in my own pocket, or from a small budget that I managed to build up from other projects within the university. Probably shouldn't say that, I'll get into trouble, but nobody's paid for this work at all. The disappointing thing is that we have all these demonstrations and we've offered them to museums and what have you, and we, for whatever reason, we just can't give them away. Now I think I don't know whether it's the prohibitive nature of the equipment or the headsets. Even that's not as big a problem as it was back in the 1990s, but it's really sad that all this stuff that we have depends on us going into schools and traveling down to the West Country to help people benefit from it. And we try to give it away, like our healthcare work. That's another example. We're being more successful with that. We give the software away. And if people can use this, and we have given it to places in the States and what have you, then I would be the first one to be really, really glad. But because we've had to do this virtual, the whole reason behind this was, again, to get students doing something that was really, really exciting. Something that's more than just, you know, a virtual reality building or a virtual reality printed circuit board or something. It's something to get them out and to build a portfolio that will enable them to hopefully expand in their career. But sadly, commissioning has been. I would never become a millionaire working on virtual heritage, but it's still my number one application.
Nice. I think that leads us on to another question that we've got from one of our participants. Which or if any of these models can you view on Quest or SideQuest?
Okay, we're having the virtual reality Mayflower. There is a version of the Mayflower that is available for Quest as an APK file. The rest of them are probably far too complex at the moment. So the majority of them require a reasonable game-ready laptop to run and a Windows 10 headset. But we are certainly in the future. We are, and some of the 360 that we've done, some of the 360s are also visible or viewable using Quest 2. But certainly when you think of when these were done, we were trying to put as much effort into creating the fidelity, and you've probably seen that from the submarine and the railway station. There's an awful lot of detail in there, so they probably wouldn't work on the Quest even if we converted them today. But certainly as we're going forward now in other projects that I'm beginning to get involved in outside my university history, we're taking the, because I believe you reflect back to the question before in terms of making these demonstrations more accessible. Putting them onto standalone headsets is a no-brainer. That's something we must do, because that's the way that virtual reality is going to improve and develop for education going forward, I think. But sadly, a lot of them are quite old now and are far too detailed.
The next question we had was, is the Who Lake the same one as the Who that was featured in The Dig? I think that was a Netflix movie that's come out recently.
Oh, The Dig, yes. I vaguely recall seeing a trailer of that film. No, is my answer to that. I don't think so. Who Lake is based, again, it's in Plymouth, no surprise there. But it's close to a place called Turnchapel. It's quite a hazardous lake because at low tide the mud is actually very, very hazardous. I don't think it's the same. But you've intrigued me now. So it's Who Lake, HOO, yeah. I shall look.
I think another one was just similar. Can we view the Barbican model on Quest? So I think that's, you already answered that about the APK file. Is that available to view online anywhere or download?
It will be, yes. We're just integrating the new extension to that now. We're hoping to make it downloadable, and we currently exists online as a set of 360s. Because again, it's if you look at some of the effects and the mist and the reflections and the material finishes and the rendering, what have you, it's really quite complex. So again, not yet on Quest, although we've just purchased a new 360 generator for Unity, and hoping to be able to experiment with that.
Okay, so this is a question from me, but what would be the best headset to view all these projects on then, or at least the Mayflower one?
Well, Mayflower will work on any of the current headsets. So, for example, HP Reverb G2, which I've got, it looks beautiful on that. Up until now, we have been using the Samsung Odyssey, and Samsung Odyssey is probably the best of a range of Windows 10, so-called Windows 10 headsets. The Asus and the Lenovo, they're okay, but they're not particularly good when it comes to things like this. But the Odyssey, Samsung Odyssey, any Windows 10 headset, the new Reverb, very nice indeed.
A question we just had coming from Massimiliano Di Luca is, some of the experiences seem to just work, whereas others were less exciting, but strangely it seemed not to be related to the quality of the graphics or the details of the model. I'm wondering if there is an important factor beside the graphics.
There's always an important factor aside from the graphics. I mean, oh, somebody's speaking then. I missed that. Yeah, so there's always an important factor aside from the graphics. It's the educational content that underlies it. I mean, some of these, remember, some of these demonstrations were done by my research fellows, and quite a lot were done by the students, and that. The students don't get their degrees by making pretty graphics. What they do is they get their degrees by doing the basic, not the bare minimum, but certainly from a representational point of view, the bare minimum. But then, as long as that demonstration tells a story and tells a story that people can then remember, that's key to me. You know, it's always people tend to get very, very het up about making things look real. And certainly history tells me that that's not the key issue, and that as long as the content is engaging, it's dynamic, and people come away remembering what it looks like, then we've been successful.
Brilliant. This was a question when you were showing us, when you were viewing the ship using AR headsets outside. So the question was, were the AR tests of the ships in the bay marker-based in some way?
Yes, they are all based on fiducial markers, which were out of the scene. I cut them out of the scene afterwards. I mean, a lot of the stuff we've done in the real world has been AR fiducial marker based. We tried some GPS based ones, but the error was unbelievable. So yes, they were marker based.
Can you explain to some of the beginners here what that means?
Yeah, fiducial marker. It's basically like a QR code. So it gets the camera that you're using, and in the case of the Mayflower and the Beagle, we were using a very simple QR code or marker, which when we were using Vuforia, you could download their recommended markers. And what happens is that when you put that to one side of the field of view, and then the camera recognizes that marker and knows where to put the 3D model. It's not always as accurate as you'd like. So what we try to do with the AR models is also build in little tweaks. So again, you're able to zoom in, zoom out, change the orientation of the model, change the perspective of the model as if it's sailing away from you, sailing towards you. So the fiducial marker, and to a lesser extent, although it's much improved now, the GPS will give you roughly where you want it, and then you fine tweak it using tools that you build into the demo.
Cool. And one of our participants wants to ask you a question now.
One
Yeah, Ansal, if you want to unmute yourself, go ahead.
Have I unmuted? So I was wondering if all these sorts of demonstrations that you do, have you thought about, and you probably have, and it might be too complex, about doing a day in the life so that when you go on one of these old ships, like the Mayflower, you act as the cabin boy and therefore sort of tell a story and get people interested in that. It may be that you don't have to have too much modelling and go in the interior or some. So that was the question. It may be too complex for the model. I don't know. But it tells us
it's not complex. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And that's what we want to do. Had we been funded, we would have selected probably 5 of the key actors or 5 of the key people that were involved in the Mayflower. So the captain, was it Christopher Jones, Edward Winslow, who could tell you about his story. There's one guy whose name I forget, who was swept off, but managed to grab onto a rope and get pulled back on. And there was some incredible stories. I think it was 1 or 2 children were given birth to during the journey, and so on and so forth. And somebody asked me that question about, well, was there a ship's doctor? Was there a ship's physician? And what was the ship's physician's job? And what kind of horrific things did he have to do, like with all those people in a confined space being sick and goodness knows what else? Had we been sponsored by the Mayflower 400 people, then turning that into a transatlantic narrative for both ourselves and the American kids would have been right on top of our list of priorities. As it stands, you're right, you're quite right. It's really sad. The Mayflower, the avatars are all standing around there, and I think the only dynamic action we've got is one of the guys being sick, and it's a real shame. It could still be done. It could still be done, and it was something I was talking with Mike Acosta, the avatar genius we brought on board, because there is so much, and it's not just the ship. It's also, the Barbican itself. People have great ideas about what trades were being conducted there, what things like press ganging, things like all the pubs and the cholera and what have you. There's so much story to be told there, and it was all in our list of aspirations. And sadly, we didn't get funded to do it. We didn't get a penny for that project, which is a real shame. But you're absolutely, technically it is very, very possible to introduce that level of narrative.
Which would be really cool, and is unfortunate that can't be funded to follow through, I guess.
Well, yeah, I agree. It could be. It's the kind of thing where if we played our cards properly, we could involve school kids. We could involve school kids in making up the scripts. We could involve members of the public. We could involve the period actors. They have period actors at the Barbican in Plymouth. They have period actors over in Massachusetts. We could make an incredible job of it. My dream would be to start from 1620 and then expand the Plymouth model and maybe even take it back a bit to Drake's and to Drake in the Spanish Armada, then take it forward to the Civil War, which was in the late 1600s, and again, with all the castles and secret passages and tunnels that exist around Plymouth. It's not just Plymouth, but all the secret passages that exist around there. You could produce a most amazing virtual reality encyclopedia of time.
Agreed. I have another question, if that's okay. Yep.
Yeah.
So we've sort of covered Stonehenge and ships, historical ships, and then there was a brief picture of TSR2, but no talk as yet of any modelling of TSR2 or Spitfire or Hurricane, or I don't know whether these have been done by other people, and it's they seem like a thing that might have been done. So that was a question really. Is there any plan on aircraft modelling, heritage aircraft modelling?
Yes. I cut those slides out. Sorry. We've done some augmented reality work with Spitfire up at RAF Harrowby, which is near Yelverton. It's an abandoned RAF World War II airfield, showing the Spitfire with the engine going in one of the dispersal pens. We did a marker-based augmented reality demo of a Lancaster flying over the dam at Burrator, which was really cool. It was pretty amateurish, but it was fun. We have got a virtual Spitfire in a hangar. We've got a virtual Lancaster in a hangar. Hurricane wouldn't be a problem. I'm just trying to think what other aircraft. The TSR-2. The TSR-2 was done about a month ago, believe it or not, and the TSR-2 came about because it was on my bucket list. It was because I just wanted to go and see the TSR-2, of which there are only two that exist now. And then we were invited to go to Cosford, and I was invited to sit in the cockpit, which was like, tick that one off my bucket list. So what we've done with the TSR-2 is we've used the Matterport camera to do a 360 3D scan all the way around the aircraft. We haven't yet modeled it, but based on work we did in 1999, I think, yes, 1999. Based on what we did back then, we actually modeled a complete tornado. F4 tornado, it's F4, yeah, at RAF Marham, where you could walk around the aircraft. You click on the compartments. You could raise the compartments. You could bring out all the avionics. You could test them. You could sit in the cockpit. You could fire up all the controls. So yeah, we've got lots of partial aircraft models. I would love to do aircraft. I mean, I've got a list of aircraft that I would like to do as long as you're on. So that would be a project of luxury for me.
Amazing stuff.
Yeah.
So I think, sorry, Ansel, have you got more questions?
No, I think that'll do from me. Thanks. Yeah. I obviously agree with everything Bob says. It's just funding issues, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah, it's always the same. It's a combination of funding issues, or keep your fingers crossed that you've got some very enthusiastic, very hardworking students who are obviously. I mean, I was lucky in engineering in that some of the students got it. They were going to graduate with or major on electronic or mechanical or civil engineering, but having their own portfolio showing that they were savvy with creative media and virtual reality gave them an extra portfolio to show at their interviews. And certainly a number of my students, I mean, I've had one go on to Carnegie Mellon. I've had students go on to work in the oil and gas industry. One of the guys actually worked on the largest petrochemical vessel afloat. We've had guys going into defense, Jaguar Land Rover. So and they all came in to do electronic engineering and ended up working in simulation.
Nuclear. What's left? Nuclear.
Nuclear. It's interesting because I was involved in the robotics area of nuclear back in the 90s. Slow to take off. We did a project modeling one of the Sellafield mixed oxide plant control room, which was very, very successful, and training people about shifts and what to look for and what have you. I haven't had any students yet, I don't think, go into the nuclear industry. I may be wrong, but off the top of my head, no, I'm not aware of any.
I'll be quiet now because so I'll let anybody else talk.
Okay. We haven't had any more questions.
I was just looking at Massimiliano's question again. So some of the experiences seem to just work. But God, they all work. They all work. Good grief. Whereas others were less exciting. They're all exciting. They've all done their job. They've all been shown in public school settings, and they've inspired school kids. That's it. Vera.
Cool. Yep. I think, yeah, I don't think anyone has any more questions, so we'll wrap it up now. Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You said in your thing that you used your you use the virtual reality models to engage kids in special needs schools. Do you mind going a bit more into that? Because, you know, like particularly how like
Yeah. Well, we've done almost sort of marathon tours, again, particularly in the West Country, of different kinds of schools, and I think the response we've had in special schools has been absolutely fantastic, particularly for kids on the autistic spectrum. And yeah, there were at least 2 schools where we were warned of children coming in who were a little bit disruptive, potentially destructive, who, when we exposed them to the virtual reality, and that's not just headset, because we tend not to put kids into headsets below the age of 8, sometimes a little bit older. But once you give them the ability to explore and, you know, in some cases walk around the ship, and the effect on their behavior has been incredible. The teachers have been gobsmacked. So it's always a pleasure to take these things into special needs schools. My wife is a retired special needs teacher as well, and she's seen the benefit of this kind of technology in focusing their attention and getting them to be creative in a gaming type environment. They tend to do a lot of study. They tend to play a lot of games when they're at home, but to be able to explore and to be able to discuss with their peers, if you like, and their teachers about what they're experiencing has been very inspiring.
thank you.
Are we done?
Oh, I've just had a question. Yeah, I've just had a question in the chat. Whether it was a private message, whether the session will be recorded. So yeah, just to let everyone know, we will be posting the recording on all our social media as well as our YouTube page. So do make sure to follow us, and I'll be posting a link in the chat in a moment. So anyone who's a student at the University of Birmingham, make sure you join the society and become a member if you're interested in learning more about VR and attending events like this. And we'll also be hosting projects in collaboration with Bob, and we'll be having a separate event for that at some point in February. So if you are interested in getting involved in the projects themselves, it'll be a really great opportunity to build your portfolio. So do sign up to be a member of the society and join our Discord server so that you can be the first people to hear about that. I'll just post the link now. I think that's all the questions we've had so far. Thank you so much, Bob, for joining us for this session. It's been a really interesting and informative talk, and I'm sure everyone's really enjoyed it as well. We've had a lot of thank yous coming in the chat already, and a lot of thank yous I've gotten private messages as well. So thank you everyone who's attended as well. I think that's a wrap. Hope we have a lot more talks like that in the future. Go ahead.
And I Massimiliano, I still love you. I just see his chat. I still love you.
All right then. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Thank you, everyone.
You.